All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for part one of our webinar series on supporting healthy relationship development in children as violence prevention. I'm very excited to have you all here, and we are going to get started. All right. So my name is Jet Bachman. I'm the Youth Educator and Program Coordinator for Day One's Elementary Prevention Initiative for Children, fondly known as EPIC. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the EPIC program and about Day One in the coming minutes. And if you have questions or if you're having any issues hearing or seeing the visual of the presentation, please let us know in the chat box. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. All right, so Day One is the only New York City organization that focuses all of our resources on working with young people under the age of 24 to end dating abuse, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and harassment. And we do that through a variety of strategies. One of those is community education. We also have supportive counseling services, legal services, professionals trainings, and webinars like this one. We also provide technical assistance for teachers, for school counselors, and other professionals. So if you have questions that come up after this webinar, feel free to reach out to us about that as well. We also do have a leadership development program called Youth Voices Network that is made up of young survivors who have worked with Day One and who are advocating to end intimate partner violence and abuse among young people. Day One, through all of this work, we use a youth empowerment model. So we are invested in working with young people alongside them and supporting them to maintain healthy relationships for themselves and their peers throughout their lives. So a little more about EPIC, which is the program that I run. So we are now finishing up our second year of this program. And prior to this, Day One provided community education for middle school and up until 24. And then we decided we really needed to expand to be working with younger students. So I facilitate workshops for K through 5 students around healthy relationships, practicing consent, setting boundaries, and respecting each other's identities. And I'll talk a little bit more about an example from my workshops to give you a sense of what that work looks like. And I also provide professional trainings for educators, counselors, other school staff who are invested in supporting children to develop healthy relationships. I also provide parent workshops. All right, so we're going to go through some logistics of this webinar series. So this is webinar part 1 of 2. The next one will be next Monday, also at 3 p.m. And you need to register for them individually, and a link will be sent out following this webinar for you to register for part 2. CEU credit will be provided if you have completed both webinars and filled out a feedback form after completing both of them. And if you're not able to attend both of them live or either of them live, that is okay. We will provide recordings of the webinars after the fact so you can take them and fill out your feedback form then. As I mentioned, if you have any issues with the audio or visual of this training, please let us know in the chat box. I will have time for questions at the end, but feel free to write them and share them as we go, and I will go back and look through them at the end and try to reach as many of them as I can. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to Noah Foster, who is our program assistant, and will be monitoring the chat while I'm facilitating and can answer any of your questions as we go. Great. So, before we get started, we're going to go over what the objectives of this training are and what the agenda is going to be. So at the end of this hour, we will have gained a deeper understanding of why early healthy relationship and consent education is fundamental for preventing future violence in relationships. We're going to discuss and reflect on our own healthy relationship values and define the differences between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationship dynamics. And we're going to talk about how those types of abuse or how those dynamics might show up specifically among the young people that we work with. So for me, that's elementary age students, but this training will also be applicable for people who are working with middle and high school aged youth. These are about fundamental healthy relationship and consent messages, so they're useful for all of us. Great, so our agenda for today is the welcome and introductions we're doing right now. We're also then going to move into why is early prevention education important, and how does it work? How can that kind of education prevent future violence? And then we're going to go into defining healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationships. And in our next webinar, we're really going to focus on how can we support young people in developing their healthy relationships? What are some strategies we can use? And how can we support young survivors? So that will be the focus of the next webinar. Great. So these community agreements, I like to do them in all of the trainings that I facilitate. They're a little more applicable in person, especially the one mic one, because right now there literally is only one microphone and it's in the room with me. But I think the other ones are important for our chat as well, since I will be asking for participation throughout the training. If people can share the air, which means if you find yourself participating a lot, just making space for other people to have a chance to share their questions and thoughts in the chat box. And in doing so, also remembering to use I statements, speaking from your experience, trying not to generalize by saying all young people act this way, right? Avoiding statements like that. Another thing, the last thing is self-care. So if you need to get up, get a drink, go to the bathroom, whatever it is, I won't know. We're not in the room together, but I really hope you will do those things as needed. Great, so we're just gonna dive right in. And I'm going to start by asking for some participation from you all in just asking, why is it important to talk to young children about consent and healthy relationships? So maybe why are you here for this webinar? Why did you feel like that was something that was important for you to learn about? And why do you think it's important for young children to learn about it? So I'm going to give a little time for people to write in the chat box, and I can read out some of those responses. All right, I see a lot of people typing. I'm excited to hear what you all have to say. All right, so I'm seeing one answer that they might be receiving messages around them from the media, from their peers, from family members, whoever it might be, and need some support in understanding them or thinking critically about them. And that's so important. And we're going to talk more about media influences and some of the places that we might think of as innocent media for children that are supporting some really harmful messages about consent and relationships. Great, so I'm seeing another participant who works with teen parents. So also equipping young people that you work with who have young children of their own and wanting to be able to impart on them some of those skills and insight in how to have conversations with their own children, definitely. Okay, also I'm seeing that young children are really curious. They have a lot of questions, and it's important for us to feel equipped to answer those questions. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in part 2 of this webinar, but it's so important for us to do the work on ourselves to unlearn some of our own stereotypes and biases about what a normal, quote unquote, normal relationship looks like that we might have to unlearn in order to support the young children in our lives. Great. I also see it's important because it's essential for everybody to understand their own boundaries and know what they're comfortable with in a relationship. Great. So in a friendship or a romantic relationship, that's so true. Excellent. And we're going to talk more about that, about setting boundaries, about communicating that, and about what that might look like among young children that we work with. Great. I see one other answer. Yes, helping young people learn how to say no, reducing self-blame, defining what consent is and isn't. Definitely. I think often when we hear about consent education, we might be hearing messages like, consent is fundamental. We have to practice it, but we might not be hearing more in depth, what does practicing consent actually look like? And we need to be giving young children the tools to be practicing that. Excellent. So these are all wonderful answers, and I'm so glad that you all have shown up here today to learn more about this topic. And I'm going to go through a couple slides adding on to all the wonderful ideas you just shared. So this first one is more statistics, but we know that 5 million children witness domestic violence in the US each year. And we also know that witnessing or experiencing domestic violence as a child increases your risk of experiencing or perpetrating violence in your relationships in the future. So, right, we sometimes think that this is, if we're seeing domestic violence in a child's home, that's impacting the adults that they live with and not directly impacting them. But it often is impacting them in really harmful ways, and we need to be talking about that and making sure that children don't feel alone in their experiences. We also know that more than 50% of women and girls who have experienced some kind of sexual violence had their first experience before the age of 18, and 22% before age 12. So I think also sometimes when I work with elementary educators or counselors, that sometimes we like to think that this type of violence and abuse is not happening among the age group that we work with, but statistics tell us otherwise, and also for many of us, our experiences hearing from young people tell us otherwise. So it's really important for us to make sure this information is available so children know that they have resources and people to go to, and so they also don't feel, again, like they're alone in what they're experiencing. Right, we also know that a third of teenagers in New York City report experiencing some kind of abuse in their romantic relationship. And these rates are actually somewhat higher in New York City, and I think it's really important for us to be paying attention to that before and addressing it before young people might be dating or before they are teenagers, to make sure that those numbers are significantly lower in the future. And then another statistic I like to put in there, because some people think students this age are not yet dating, is that 1 in 4 middle school students in New York City are dating. And what dating looks like to a 6th grader might be very different from what it looks like to an 8th grader. But it's really important, and this is part of Day One's youth empowerment lens and doing anti-ageist work, is that we shouldn't be diminishing the dating that young people are doing just because it might not look the way we might think of dating that we're doing or that teenagers are doing, right? Because in middle school and elementary school, if students say that they're dating each other, that's what that means to them. And those relationships are important to them. And we need to take seriously the positives and the negatives of that to adequately support them. Great. So next is that children are constantly receiving negative and often confusing messages about relationship norms, about consent, about gender roles in relationship, and sexual violence from the world around us. So that was brought up when I asked for you all to say why you felt that this was important, is the messages that young children are already receiving. So I think one of those, of the text boxes I have here, one is about mandating children to show affection to other adults I see this specifically among family members, and sometimes this is confusing for children, especially if they've been told, don't talk to strangers, don't go anywhere with an adult you don't know, and then they're with their parent and they run into their parent's friend from years and years ago who they don't know, and their parents like, give this person a hug, they're my friend. It's rude if you don't do that. And that can be really confusing because this person actually is a stranger to this child. So just thinking about being consistent in our messaging, and not pushing children to do physical affection, especially to adults, if it's making them uncomfortable, because that can set a really dangerous precedent of normalizing, what an adult wants and tells you to do is more important than your own comfort. And that is not a message that we want to be sending young children. On the note of negative messages in terms of normative and very binary gender roles in relationships, we often hear things like, oh, he just teases you because he likes you, or, oh, boys will be boys, don't take it too seriously, or don't be upset about that. So these kinds of messages can often seem innocent and sort of benign, and we hear them a lot, but they can also create a situation where your discomfort and someone crossing your boundaries is seen as a sign of love and affection. And it also teaches young people on the other side of this message that showing affection can be done through pushing across someone's boundaries, which is also a really unhealthy message that we don't want to be sending to young children. And the last thing I have in here is a photo from a movie I'm sure many of us are familiar with, from Snow White. And I like to highlight this because I think Disney movies are something that many of the children in our lives have engaged with. And I think it's important for us to think critically about media we share widely with children, right? In Sleeping Beauty, in Snow White, the romantic climax of these movies is a man who is essentially a stranger kissing an unconscious woman, right? That there is not consent happening there. This person is unconscious, but we're sort of brought through the movie as though this is the height of romance that is happening right now. And so when we see instances of this happening in real life, I think we need to ask questions about the types of messages we are sending to young children from the very beginning of their lives about what romance looks like, what falling in love looks like, what a first kiss should look like, right? Because we actually have a lot of these really negative and harmful messages about consent around us that we might not even be thinking about, right? So someone who brought up giving children tools to think critically about the media around them is really important. Okay, so now that we've talked about sort of the dire state of things, I think that it's really important to recognize that we do have a lot of power to intervene in these negative messages, to model positive relationship norms for the children that we work with, for all the children in our lives. And we really want to be proactively giving young people tools they need to empower them to make healthy choices about their bodies, about their relationships throughout their lives. And I like to give the example of I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, and my mom, when I was very young, probably 5 years old, went over this plan with me over and over again of what if we're on the subway and one of us gets off at the stop and the other one gets stuck on the train, right? And this scenario never happened, but I knew exactly what to do if it did happen because my mom had proactively given me a plan of what if this emergency situation happens, here's what we're going to do. So I think often we feel uncomfortable giving young children tools, especially around consent, which is so heavily associated with sexuality and sex, that we feel like, oh, is this a conversation I want to broach at this point in a child's life? And I think it's really about giving young people the tools that they need maybe right now or maybe 10 years from now. It doesn't really matter when they decide to be in a relationship that we would consider romantic or intimate, right? Because these are tools they need for all of their relationships and for them to feel empowered to make choices and assert their boundaries in their lives in any situation. And the last point is that this kind of education works. So research has shown that healthy relationships education that includes gender power dynamics has been proven to reduce rates of intimate partner violence experienced by youth by up to 60%. So 60% is a huge number. And just the fact that has ever been proven to be possible is amazing and shows how important this information is and how effective it is if we were to start providing it in elementary school, in middle school, how much of a decrease in rates of IPV among teenagers would we see, right? And that's the kind of world that we're hoping to imagine and build and talk about. So now I would love to hear from you all again. This is an activity I do in every K through 5 workshop about our introduction to healthy relationships. So I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the qualities that you all look for in a healthy relationship? What do you feel like you need to feel respected and valued in a relationship? So I'll give everyone a little time to put in their answers, their thoughts. Great, so I'm seeing open and consistent communication, really important. I see feeling recognized and supported, definitely. I see communication, respect, active listening, excellent. Good communication, mutual respect. Yeah, and something I want to say about communication and active listening around consent is that often, and setting boundaries, often we're hearing the message of how do you say no? How do you say yes? How do you assert your boundaries? But it's equally important to ask ourselves, how do I look for yes? How do I look for no? How do I respect boundaries, right? Because if it doesn't matter how well you communicate or assert what you're comfortable with and what you need if the other person doesn't listen, right? So communication and also active listening. Excellent. I see love and respect, respect and communication. Knowing that your boundaries will be respected and valued, definitely. And I would say that that to me also falls under trust, right? Being able to trust that if you communicate what you need to this person and what you are and aren't comfortable with, that you can trust them with that information and that they will respect you. Definitely. Thank you all for those answers. Great, so some other ones I like to add are also independence and consent and time for ourselves, right? That's one that comes up a lot among the students that I work with, and feeling like maybe your best friend, you have to spend time with them all the time every day and you shouldn't spend time with anybody else, right? And that actually we deserve to have more than one relationship in our lives, and we get different things from different relationships, and we deserve time to ourselves and independence. And I bring this up because some of the things that we have mentioned as being necessary for our healthy relationships are actually really difficult for children to assert in their relationships, especially with adults, right? So it might be really hard for a child to feel respected by an adult in their life. I'm sure we've all heard sort of classic refrain of a child asking, why do I have to do this thing? An adult saying, because I said so, right? Because I'm in authority and you have to do what I say, essentially. And so I think in those situations, it can be really hard for children to feel like they have practice asserting their boundaries, asserting their independence in some of the most important relationships in their lives, right? With their caregivers, with their teachers, with their family members. So next time we're also gonna, in talking about how we can support young children, we're gonna dive a little bit more into that and how we can also check our own sort of adultist tendencies to diminish what children are experiencing, or perhaps think that we don't have to work for their respect when they have to work for ours, right? So now, thank you all for all these excellent thoughts on what makes a healthy relationship. We're going to move into defining some of the differences in dynamics between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationships. So, in a healthy relationship, we have power sharing dynamics. So, that means that decisions are being made equitably through open communication, right? Some things that were mentioned just now by people as important values. Communication, I think equity is really important. Feeling that each person is heard and their needs are respected, and they're maybe negotiating things, but they don't feel like one person is hugely compromising for what another person has asked for in the relationship. And moving on, we have unhealthy here in the middle, which is more of a power struggle dynamic. So we might have a very healthy relationship for the most part that sometimes devolves into power struggle or unhealthy dynamics. That can happen. It's really important to be aware of how often that's happening, what it's happening around. So power struggle can look like decision making often is devolving into conflict, right? So we're trying to make a decision or we're trying to come to an agreement, but it's just completely devolves. Neither person is being heard, neither person is feeling particularly respected, and everyone feels like they're making compromise, right? They're not really negotiating and hearing each other, but each person comes away feeling like they really got the short end of the stick. And moving on, we have an abusive power over dynamic. So that looks like one person has the most decision-making power, and the other person's needs are rarely heard, and they're regularly compromising, sometimes completely, on what they've asked for in order to meet the rules or asks that have been set by the other person in the relationship. So a really important thing to understand about unhealthy and abusive relationships is that they're a pattern of behavior, and they often happen in cycles. So we might see a moment or a time period of feeling like a relationship is really caring and loving, and seems like it's in this healthy category, but they're regularly in a cycle are these really intense power over moments, right? So it's important for us to understand that an abusive relationship doesn't necessarily look abusive from the outside to us all the time, and doesn't necessarily feel abusive to the people in it all the time, right? And so that is one of the things that often makes it hard for people to leave abusive relationships, because there are these moments of it feeling so wonderful and caring, and all of the reasons this person initially entered into a relationship. So I think it's important for us to be aware of this so that we can bring that insight to the young people that we work with, and also so that we can help them identify when a pattern of behavior is happening. I'm often asked by schools to speak about bullying, and that's not quite the focus of my work, but what I will say about that is that it similarly is about a pattern of power over dynamics, right? So being bullied doesn't mean that this person is constantly doing the behavior to you, but it means that it's happening over and over again with enough frequency that it feels like this person has some kind of power over your life. So I think it's important for us to recognize that connection, especially when we're talking about young children and friendships that might be unhealthy. Great. So next I want to talk about what are some types of abuse. And I think in terms of domestic violence, the first thing that comes to people's minds is physical abuse. but it's really important for us to talk about all of the different ways that this might look. So on here we have tech abuse, we have emotional abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse, and what I want to ask you all to do is to think about the age of children that you work with, or if you have a child yourself, how old they are, and pick one of these types. And if you can just free think some of the ways that might show up in that age group. So I'm going to give everyone a minute or two to think about that. Not a minute or two, a little time to think about that. And let us know which type of abuse you're thinking about and an example of how you think that might show up or could show up among younger children. All right, I see that a lot of people are typing. Excellent. And the reason that I ask for this free think and this kind of participation is that I think this again, right, in theory, we can talk about it's really important for us to send these fundamental healthy relationship messages to young children, but sometimes when we're actually thinking about what would we be intervening in, it can become harder to imagine what that might look like in this age group. So I see one person has written, with teenagers, emotional abuse might manifest in one partner feeling unable to negotiate sexual boundaries or contraceptive use. Yes, definitely. And that would also fall into sexual abuse too, and potentially also reproductive abuse, right? Depending on what exactly their partner is not allowing them to negotiate. And someone else has written, again, working with teenagers and some people experiencing abuse within their family. So parents who are doing emotional, physical, financial, or sexual abuse and having that be perpetrated by family members. And that also relates to what we were speaking about before, just in terms of within your family, there really is a power hierarchy for children, right? Of that there is someone else who is in control of so much of the resources in their life, right? And that can easily be manipulated in a power over type of relationship. I see another response that says, younger children might exhibit signs of trauma and abuse through acting out behaviors or creating images and doing withdrawn social and emotional behaviors. Yes, definitely. So sometimes we want to be aware of this, that some young children who have experienced some form of sexual abuse may have knowledge about sex and sexuality that seems a little mature for their age. They may be drawing about it, they may be talking about it, right? But we also need to be careful with that because, as we talked about at the beginning, young children are really curious. They're trying to explore their bodies, they're trying to find out about the things that adults are doing that they're not supposed to know about. They have a lot of questions, and they may be asking older siblings or other family members questions, other young people questions. So we should be mindful of that if children are displaying a large knowledge, sexual knowledge that we feel is beyond their age. We should be aware of that, and also that it's okay for children to have a lot of questions and want to know about that. Okay, so I'm also seeing something about spiritual abuse. Yes, the idea that I won't be your friend if you don't do this or that, and using those threats to override boundaries. Definitely. Something that has come up in, oh great, I was about to talk about tech abuse, and we have a tech response. Monitoring someone's calls, who they speak with, repeatedly texting them, sending them explicit photos, definitely. So that's some tech abuse. It's also potentially some sexual abuse of if someone is demanding explicit photos. And that can also be physical in a different way, right? Of this person is where they go is being controlled by somebody else or being monitored by somebody else. And that can feel really physically trapping, even if it's not the sort of like physical abuse that might initially come to mind. Something else with tech abuse and the idea of I won't be your friend if you don't do this thing, something that comes up in workshops I do, especially with 3rd through 5th graders, is students being concerned about someone else using their phone to buy games or buy things on their phone through the App Store, and then them getting in trouble with their parent, whoever is paying for their phone, and their friend using that as a way to coerce them into doing other things of, if you don't hang out with me, I'm gonna do this thing again that I know gets you in trouble, right? So that's somewhere between tech abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, right? And I think that also, especially in elementary and middle school, but this is true for all ages, I think, that those start to be developmentally the years when children are realizing that having friends is a really important thing, or being able to say that you have friends feels incredibly socially necessary. And so the threat of losing a friend is incredibly effective, right? As something that someone you are in a relationship with can hold over you, right? And that is manipulative and it is unhealthy. So next time, I'm also going to share a resource with you from day one that is our new guide for caregivers and educators who work with young children. And it's about starting conversations around healthy relationships and intervening in negative messages. And it also includes a quiz that you can take with young children just to go over some signs of what might be unhealthy dynamics. What might that look like among friends in this age group? So these are some great examples. Oh, I see another answer. Controlling what they wear, being purposely offensive or belittling towards them, definitely. And that can also apply to being belittling about their family, being belittling about, I saw someone else brought up religion, being belittling about their religion, race, where they live, their family's income, right? Anything, any type of identity, using that as a way to put down your friend or someone you're in a relationship with is definitely emotional abuse. Okay, so thank you all for all of those examples of what this might look like, and for thinking that through. And oh, I wanted to bring up another example that I've heard more with middle school, but a trend called shipping, which is essentially other students in your class have decided that you and this other classmate would be a great couple. And they've started putting up pictures on social media of the two of you, sort of like images cropped together of the two of you, claiming that you're in a relationship and saying what an awesome couple you would be, right? So not only might a student this age be experiencing pressure from a peer to be in a relationship with them, they also might be experiencing pressure from their friends to be in a relationship with somebody else. And I see this come up a lot, right, at this age. It's sort of expected that children are making friends within the gender binary. So I think we see this a lot when in middle school, if a boy has a girl as his best friend, that people might start doing this kind of tech and digital abuse of pressuring those people to be dating when really they're just friends, right? So that's another example that has come up for me in workshops and trainings that I wanted to bring up for you all. Great. So Right. Now that we've talked about what unhealthy relationships, what abusive relationships might look like among children of this age, we also want to talk about what we can do to be supporting children in developing healthy relationships. How can we be doing that? What are some tools to do that? And that's going to be the entire focus of next Monday's part 2 of this webinar. So if you are excited to learn more about that, I hope you join us then. And I wanted to give one or two examples of that from this first one is from our EPIC program. And these are some reflections from a workshop series. So 5 workshops that I facilitated with the same 5th grade class. And at the end of our 5 weeks together, we had a workshop that was us reflecting on all the things that they had learned, their favorite moments, their favorite activities, and I just wanted to highlight some of the reflections that came out of this workshop series. So the 3 I highlighted on the right, one is a student said that they learned you can say no to people even if they're begging you over and over, right? So I think that that's something we see a lot. Speaking of media representations of romance, right, of just badgering someone over and over again, asking them out, especially is an example we see, until the person says, okay, fine. And we're supposed to think that that is the start of a fabulous romance, when really it's pretty coercive, right? So it was really exciting to me to see this as a reflection from a 5th grader of saying, you know what, I feel empowered to say no to somebody, even if they're really annoying me and asking me over and over again for this thing. The next one, when someone says no, it means no. Great takeaway. I think that this also is a testament to how in-depth and complicated the conversations we can have with young students are if we believe that they can have them, right? I think this concept of no means no is something that many adults are struggling with, struggling to accept, are pushing back on. And here we have a 5th grade class that was totally on board with that, understood why that was important, understood why they would want to say someone to stop what they're doing if they say no to them. And this last one, I learned how to know if your friend is uncomfortable or not near you. And I love that because this one was coming from the other side of things, not of saying no to somebody, but of respecting somebody else's no, or of just looking for other people's discomfort, right? Because the responsibility should not be completely on the person who is feeling uncomfortable or who is feeling violated to make it known, right? We also need to practice reading each other's body language, reading each other's facial expressions, getting to know people so that we can tell when they're uncomfortable specifically. Another one on here that I can just read off the post-it says, I learned communication is very important, right? And I've also had students reflect, wow, at the end of this workshop series, I realized other people have different emotions than me about different things, right? So if one person loves hugs, somebody else sitting next to you in your class might really never want to be hugged, right? And just having that their own experience in the room be the fuel for talking about and understanding these concepts if we give them the space to do it. And we're in unique positions to do that. So I also wanted to show a really wonderful video. This is from Stacy Ann Chin's YouTube channel, where she does these living room protests with her daughter. And this is from a couple years ago. I think this is Living Room Protest 3, and now there are many, many more of them. And I would highly recommend looking through some more, but I wanted to show this video as an example of what a conversation with an even younger child who's not even old enough to be in kindergarten, what that conversation might look like. So we're going to take a look at this video, and hopefully the audio works for all of you.
Hi, this is Yuri, and this is my mama, and today this is our third living room protest.
Absolutely, our third living room protest. And what are we protesting today, Zurichin?
For picking up.
For picking up, as in you don't like when people pick you up, or you like when they pick you up?
Yeah.
Yeah, what? You don't like it?
Uh-huh.
You have to be clear about these things.
I don't.
You don't like when they pick you up?
No.
Okay. What about when they have your permission?
No.
Not even when they have your permission, you just don't like to be picked up. Why don't you like to be picked up?
Because my mission is no.
Your permission is no. Okay. So no picking up kids without their permission. Can you say that?
No kids say no picking up.
Because no means
No.
no means no. So don't pick me up without my permission, even if I'm a kid.
And I also want you to stop when I want you to come, and when you touch me, I will say yes.
Okay, so when you say yes, then it's okay to touch me.
Yeah.
But when you say no, it's not
Mommy,
okay.
Can I touch you?
Yes, you can touch me.
Tickle, 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 tickle.
Grand. Zuri, can I touch you?
Yes.
Absolutely. Tickle, 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 tickle. All right, well, that's our living room protest. All about touching and bodies and picking up and permission. Do you want to say... Do you want
Let's
to...
do everyone.
We want to do another living room protest?
Yeah.
Well, let's finish with this one first, okay?
Okay, so I would love to hear some reflections from all of you, what you thought of that video, what you saw Zuri working through, how you saw Stacey and Chin responding, and what you thought of that video. See a couple people typing. And as I mentioned, I really recommend checking out this YouTube channel because now Zuri is at least 3 years older, and sometimes they make videos that are revisiting some of the conversations they've had in the past. And so just watching the evolution of those conversations is really exciting and a testament to what can happen if we facilitate these conversations and give space to them for children from the beginning. Someone is writing, I loved her saying, my permission is no. Yes. And I think also in those moments where you can tell that Stacey Ann is being very patient, right? And working through what is being said because Zuri doesn't have all the tools to articulate exactly what she wants to say, but being an adult in the room, you're in an amazing position to sort of ask extra questions to figure out, okay, what do you really want to say and how can you be clear about it? Excellent. Having an affirming way of saying no. Yes. Someone says, I like this video because at that age, it's assumed that children want to participate in what adults want them to do. Definitely. So something like, oh, I want to pick up this child because they're so cute and children love to snuggle, right? Not all children like that. Not all children feel comfortable being affectionate with every adult in their life, right? And so it's really important for us to sometimes put aside a little of our ego and what we're expecting from children and really ask them genuinely what they want and give them space to share that. And be patient with them if they're having trouble articulating it or if they're working through it. Yeah, and I think sometimes, right, caring for children is really hard work. There are so many things going on, and it can often feel like we just need to get through all the things that we have to do today, and our child has to come along do it regardless, right? And in school, children have to be in school and learn whether they feel like being there or not that day often. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that children are whole people having all kinds of complicated feelings. They often have less tools to talk about them, which can be really frustrating. And it's important for us to support space for them to share those things and for them to just feel whatever it is, annoyed, frustrated, mad, upset, or really happy and excited to share with us. Definitely. So, giving children a voice at an age when we often don't think to ask them. Definitely. And I think in viewing the later videos and seeing how much Zuri can articulate at, age 8 is pretty amazing and is at a level of complexity and depth about these conversations that we might expect a child that age is not capable of. Instead of realizing that, wow, if we gave every child the opportunity to have these conversations from a very young age, from the time that they can be having conversations, then they would be really, really equipped to talk about them by the time they're in second grade, in eighth grade, Great. So teaching children their rights in relationship to others, definitely. And it can be especially hard. I've heard from many educators and other adults in my life that sometimes when they're trying to support their child in making these decisions, in asking them what they want, that sometimes it's other adults in their lives who make it really difficult, right? Or having a family member who thinks your child is incredibly rude because you are encouraging them to set boundaries, right? And that can be a really big challenge and can be a lot of work. But it's so important that children know they have a right to assert their boundaries in relationships. They have a right to say when they're uncomfortable with something. And as adults, we have more tools to kind of manage our ego or manage our whatever level of hurt we might feel that our little cousin doesn't want to give us a hug right now. And is it really more important to get what you want, or is it more important to model for this child that setting boundaries is really important and you respect that they're doing that, right? Definitely. And just showing like what consent might look like and all of the nuanced things that you might talk about consent in relation to, right? We often hear about it in relation to sex and having this instance of we can talk about it in relation to people just picking you up without asking, right? That's someone moving your body without your permission. That's a really big deal. It's important for you to be able to assert consent around that. Things like hugging, things like playing together, whatever it might be, that consent is applicable to all those situations. And it's also applicable to negotiating what kind of dynamics we want in our relationship, right? What we mean by being best friends with somebody, what they mean by being best friends, right? That we might have different expectations around what our relationship even looks like in a macro way. And that negotiating and thinking about consent can be really helpful for that as well. Great, so we are just almost at time, so I'll go through takeaways and then we will have some space for questions. So our main takeaways from today: all children and everybody really of any age deserve information about healthy relationships and how they deserve to be treated, right? And we can start those conversations as early as we want, right? I like showing that video because it's proof that you can have a conversation with a very young child about their understanding of consent. And maybe they can't articulate it in all of the ways that you can as an adult or that a teenager would be able to, but they understand what it's like to feel uncomfortable. They understand what it's like to feel that someone is not respecting what they want. And they should also equally know what it's like from you to feel their boundaries are respected, to feel people are checking in with them, are asking what they want. And this is a great way we can model and intervene in other messages by just being that adult in their life who is asking them those questions, who does act like they have feelings about their boundaries or their body. And on that note, we have the unique ability as educators, as caregivers, as counselors, whatever your role may be, as someone who has a child in your life in any capacity, to respect and support young people navigating their relationships. And we have the ability to intervene in all the negative messages that are swirling around them and to give them tools to think critically about those messages and where they're coming from and what are they saying. So we're going to really delve into this next time, but a key first step in supporting young people to develop healthy relationships is committing to ourselves that we're going to learn more about what healthy relationships look like and how we can model them and how we can create them in our own lives so that we can speak from experience and with wisdom on them to the young people in our lives, right? So we took an hour-long step to do that today, and we're going to do it again next week. So thank you all so much for being here, and we have a little bit of time for questions. So if folks have any questions, please enter them in the chat box, and I'll take some time to answer them. I know that we are pretty much at time, but I just want to give that space if people have remaining questions. And if I don't get to your question in the 2 minutes we have left, we're going to send you a feedback form right after this, and you're welcome to email your question to me, and I will answer it then. Okay, we'll see. Maybe I have time for one question, and then I'll let you all get on with your days. Great, so while we're waiting for a question, I just want to do a quick overview of what next time will look like. We will be talking more in depth about how we can support young people in developing healthy relationships, how we can support young survivors if they come to us and share experiences of unhealthy or abusive relationships. And we will also leave with some tools and resources that you can look into, or you can share with parents, or you can share with other staff at your school. Yes, excellent. So I have a question about brochures or pamphlets. So next time I will be sharing with you our resource guide. It is geared towards adults to use with children that they work with. So it has a quiz in it that you can use with young people and walk them through, just asking them some questions about their relationships to get a sense of if any unhealthy dynamics might be going on. And our plan is in the next few months to be developing a similar guide that is just for children. So if you are on our mailing list, which I hope that's how many of you found out about this webinar, you will have access to that once we publish and print it. Great, okay, so we are right at time, and I want to respect the hour that people committed to this today. So thank you all so much for being here. My contact info is on this slide if you would like to reach out to me. We also have a toll-free hotline and a text line at day one if that is something you would like to share with young people that you work with. Again, we're going to be sending you a feedback form and the link to register for part 2 of this webinar, which will be next Monday at 3 p.m. And you're welcome to respond to that with any remaining questions or other things that come up between now and then. So thank you all so much for being here, for participating, for sharing your knowledge in the chat box with everybody. And I'm looking forward to seeing you for part 2 of this webinar next week. Thank you all so much.